Kale, Jay whispered, moored himself into any receiver. Hang in there, little guy. He ducked through broken walls, the air thick with smoke and heat shimmer. The building's heart was half buried under fallen steel beams, but in the middle, to the heat distortion, something moved. A figure, small, gray-skinned, trembling. A child with luminous orange eyes, clutching a metallic shard half buried in his chest armor. When Jay approached, the boy hissed and lifted a shard of debris like a knife. Easy, Jay said, raising both hands. I'm not here to hurt you. Kale's voice was weak, rasping. Everyone says that before they burn. The words hit harder than the heat. Jay crouched low. You're right to be careful, but you're not alone anymore. He took off his helmet and set it beside him, exposing his sweat-soaked face. See? No tricks. The boy stared at him, confused. You're human. Last I checked. Something about that broke the tension. The kid's hand dropped slightly. That's when the warning siren on Jay's wrist blared. A proximity alert. Multiple signatures approaching. Not human. Not friendly. Far above, in orbit, General Rakesh stood before a projection table, watching live feeds from the battlefield. His soldiers, reptilian armored disciplined, moved in perfect formation. Rakesh's cold eyes followed the human blip, moving deep into the ruins. Is that the courier? He asked. Yes, General, replied his adjutant. He ignored protocol and entered the sector alone. Rakesh let out a deep, rumbling laugh. Typical. Humans cannot resist playing hero. Watch. In 10 minutes, he will be another smear on the sand. But something in his tone wasn't pure contempt. It was part fascination, the same kind of hunter feels for prey that refuses to run. Back on the surface, Jay had seconds to react. Plasma bolts hissed through the dust. He shoved Kale behind a collapsed pillar. Stay down, he ordered, drawing his sidearm. A small human kinetic pistol that looked almost primitive compared to alien weaponry. The attackers emerged from the smoke. Scavenger drones, rogue units still active from the earlier battle. 3 of them. Fast. Unpredictable. Jay moved low. Fired once. The shot punched through a drone's optic, shattering it. 2 left. He rolled behind a beam, returning fire, his aim steady despite the heat and exhaustion. When the last drone fell, the silence that followed was deafening. Jay turned back to the boy, breathing hard. You okay? Kale nodded, eyes wide. Then, faintly, from above, a low hum. A massive alien gunship hovered overhead, shadows swallowing the ruins. Jay grabbed Kale's arm. We have to move. They ran. Fire chased them. The building behind them collapsed, throwing sparks and molten debris into the air. The temperature climbed until it was unbearable. The only shelter left was an old reactor tunnel, but the way there cut straight through a line of burning fuel conduits. The ground itself was fire. Kale hesitated. It's too hot. We'll die. Jaden slowed down. Then we'll die moving forward. And that was the moment that would burn itself into every sensor feed, every alien report, every stunned whisper across the fleet. The human didn't hesitate. He walked through the fire, not sprinting, not diving, just walking, carrying the boy close, shielding it with his own body as flames licked across his suit. His visor melted, his arm blistered, and he kept moving. Rakesh, watching from orbit, felt something like static crawl under his scales. Pause the feed, he ordered. The image froze. The human mid-step. Flames wrapping around him like liquid gold. That thing, the general murmured. He walked into fire for someone not his own? Yes, General. He stared in silence. Then, slowly, almost bitterly, Rakesh said, Humans. They burn and call it mercy. The transport secondary crew later found Jay unconscious, but alive, with Kale safe in his arms. His suit was fused with skin, the air around him scorched into glass. When Rakesh received the report, he said nothing. He simply stood at the viewport, watching the copper dawn rise over the burning planet. And for the first time in his long, merciless career, he wondered if perhaps courage was not a weapon, but a contagion. The medbay lights hummed softly, their glow flickering over burnt steel and bandaged flesh. Jahan woke to the sting of antiseptic and the faint sound of alien speech, sharp, rhythmic syllables that didn't quite fit in his human ears. He blinked, trying to remember where he was. The ceiling wasn't Terran, the walls weren't friendly, and the air smelled faintly of ozone and disinfectant oil. Then a shadow moved near his cot. "Do not sit up yet," said a voice, deep, firm, alien. Jay turned his head. Standing by the doorway was General Vrakesh, tall, scaled, draped in an officer's cloak that shimmered faintly under the medlights. His reptilian eyes caught the glow like molten amber. "You must be the one who walked through fire," the general said. "A curious strategy for survival." Jay tried to smirk, but winced instead. "Worked, didn't it?" Vrakesh tilted his head slightly. The alien equivalent of a smile, perhaps? Barely. The silence stretched between them, heavy and strange. Then, behind the general's broad frame, a smaller figure peeked around his legs. Kale, clutching a blanket, eyes still glowing faintly from the bioluminescence of his species. The boy ran forward and hugged Jay's arm, startling both soldiers in the room. "Hey, kid," Jay murmured, ruffling his head gently. "You made it." Kale nodded. "You didn't let go." The words, simple as they were, hit like a strike to the chest. Later, when the medtechs cleared out, Vrakesh returned, this time alone. He held a small metallic sphere in his clawed hand. The thing pulsed faintly with blue light. "This," he said, setting it on the table beside Jay's bed, "was embedded in the child's armor. You risked your life to retrieve it, though you had no knowledge of its importance." Jay eyed it warily. "I don't risk lives for things. Just people." That answer seemed to unsettle the general more than he expected. "You are aware," Vrakesh continued, voice low, "that this shard holds encrypted battle intelligence capable of turning entire campaigns." Jay shrugged, then grimaced at the pain. "So I brought back 2 wins instead of 1. The alien general studied him for a long time. Finally, "Humans, your kind has a strange definition of logic." "Yeah," Jay said quietly. "We call heart." For the next few days, recovery blurred into routine. Kale rarely left Jay's side. Whenever the humans weren't around, alien officers whispered in low tones about the human firewalker, about how even the general had paused to watch him. To the Varnak soldiers, courage was mathematics, a ratio between probability and gain. The idea of risking your life for someone not your own species? It wasn't bravery. It was insanity. But Kale didn't see it that way. He sat one evening beside Jay, playing with the edge of his blanket. "They think you're foolish," he said softly. Jay looked up from the bandage he was rewrapping. "Are they wrong?" Kale's small smile was the first genuine one since the fire. "I don't think so." Then, with the blunt honesty of a child, "You remind me of my father. He said courage was doing what's right even if nobody claps." That line hung in the air like a ghost. Jay's hand stilled. "Sounds like he was a good man." "He died protecting our colony," Kale whispered. "The general said it was wasteful, that we were already lost." Vrakesh, standing quietly in the doorway, unseen until then, spoke softly. "I said what the numbers demanded." Both turned toward him. The general's gaze lingered on the boy, then on the human. "Numbers are not always right," Jay said. Vrakesh's jaw tightened. "Without numbers, wars are chaos." "Without heart," Jay countered, "wars never end." For a brief second, the alien commander, conqueror of half a quadrant, looked uncertain. That night, alarms blared through the outpost. The walls shook and the lights flickered red. Vrakesh was already in motion, shouting commands. "Incoming hostiles, orbital debris drop. Evacuate sectors 2 through 7. Jay tried to rise, but the medtechs restrained him. "You're not fit for combat," one protested. Jay glared. "You think fire stopped me, and you think this will?" He shoved the tech aside, pulled on his scorch jacket, and looked down at Kale. "Stay close. Don't let go, all right?" Outside, chaos. The bombardment wasn't random. Someone was targeting the refugee shelters. Vrakesh's troops struggled to contain panic as fire streaked from the sky. One explosion ripped through the main power grid. "Shields collapsing," barked an officer. Jay was there, hauling civilians toward the evacuation corridor. The human, still limping, directing soldiers not even his own. Something about the tone in his voice, the sheer certainty in his movements, cut through fear better than any order Rakesh could issue. When a plasma conduit ruptured nearby, sending fire flooding across the deck, Rakesh saw it. That familiar, horrifying pattern. Jay was running toward it again. "Not again," the general growled, leaping after him. The human dove through the blast zone, grabbed a trapped technician by the collar, and threw him clear, taking the burn himself. When the smoke cleared, Jay was still standing. "Barely. You truly have no sense," Rakesh muttered, half furious, half amazed. Jay coughed, smiling weakly. "Guess not." Later, when the fires died and the base lay half ruined but intact, Rakesh found himself standing beside Jay in the wreckage. The stars above flickered faintly through cracks in the structure. "You disobeyed every order," Rakesh said, voice oddly quiet. Jay wiped soot from his face. "You're welcome." The general's tail flicked in irritation, or maybe amusement. "You saved lives that were strategically expendable." "Funny," Jay replied. "That's what most of us are, strategically expendable, but alive anyway." The alien turned to face him fully. "Tell me, human, why? Why run into the flames again? You already proved yourself once." Jay's gaze drifted toward Kale, asleep on a cot nearby. "Because some things are worth proving more than once." For a long time, Rakesh didn't respond. Then he said almost to himself, "When I first saw your species, I thought you were reckless animals. Soft skin, no natural armor, no claws. Yet every time I study you, I find something I cannot measure." Jay chuckled softly. "That's the fun part, General. You can't." Rakesh looked at him, then at the smoldering horizon outside. "Perhaps courage," he said finally, "is not the absence of fear. Perhaps it is a refusal to surrender even when logic demands it. Sounds pretty human to me." The general gave a slow nod. "Or perhaps it should be Varnak too." The night after the bombardment, Rakesh stood alone at the outpost balcony. His reflection stared back from the glass. A commander whose victories had always come from numbers, now shaken by a single uncalculated act of mercy. Behind him, Kale slept peacefully in Jay, wrapped in burns and exhaustion, leaned against the wall, eyes half closed. Rakesh didn't turn around, but his voice carried across the room. "You have changed the way my soldiers look at you, human." Jay smiled faintly. "Not me, just how you look at yourselves." Outside, dawn broke over Draction for once more. Still copper, still burning, but now softer somehow. The war wasn't over. But something inside the alien general had cracked. A fracture wide enough for light to slip through. The storm came without warning. It began as a tremor in the air, a low vibration that made the metal decks hum. Then the skies opened. Not with rain, but with plasma. Bolts of blue fire streaked down like divine punishment, slicing through Draction IV's atmosphere and turning entire ridgelines into rivers of molten glass. The Varnak defense grid screamed warnings across every comm channel. The outpost where Jay, Kale, and General Rakesh were stationed was now the center of an orbital strike pattern. "Targeting signatures locked," barked a panicked officer. "They're not aiming for the fortress. They're aiming for us." Rakesh's claws dug into the command console. "They wouldn't dare strike my post, not with civilians inside." But even as he said it, the horizon lit up with a massive detonation, proof that "wouldn't dare" meant nothing in war. Jay stood behind him, already strapping on a half-broken suit. "They're not after your fortress, General. They're after your future." Rakesh turned sharply. "What?" "The memory shard, the one Kale carried. They know it's here." The realization hit both men at the same time. If the shard was destroyed, the entire peace negotiation that might have ended the war would die with it. And the data was in the southern wing, already engulfed in fire. The choice: evacuate everyone north, Rakesh ordered. "We'll contain what we can." Jay moved toward the armory door. "You misunderstand," the general snapped. That was not suggestion. Jay looked at him, calm, steady, too quiet. You're good at orders, General. I'm good at saving things that shouldn't be savable. Before Rakesh could respond, Jay was already gone, sprinting down the corridor, smoke pouring through shattered vents. The air was pure hell. Flames roared to the southern wing, feeding on oxygen leaks and melting the floor plating into puddles of metal. Jay's suit sensors overloaded almost instantly. Temperature warnings flashed red, then blacked out completely. He ignored them. His breath came in ragged bursts. Each step was like wading through molten sand. The shard was stored in the containment vault, behind a half-collapsed bulkhead that glowed cherry red. Of course, Jay muttered, coughing. Always behind something that wants me dead. He braced his shoulder against the door, pushed once. Nothing. Twice. Pain shot through his ribs. The third time, the metal gave way, cracking open with a scream of stress. Inside, a dim blue glow pulsed faintly in the heat. The shard. He stumbled toward it, every movement dragging against gravity and exhaustion. The floor crunched beneath him, bones of the corridor's structure cracking like glass. When his gloved fingers finally touched the shard, it was burning hot, searing through the fabric. But he didn't let go. The fire watches. Far above, on the observation deck, Rakesh watched a live thermal feed. He couldn't look away. Human heat signature still active, reported a technician. He's inside the vault sector, sir. Rakesh's jaw clenched. Pull him out. We can't. The sector's collapsing. The general slammed a fist into the console, splitting the metal. Then send drones. Too late, General. He's past recovery threshold. Rakesh froze. The last frame on the screen showed a lone human figure standing in a sea of flame, holding the data shard to his chest. He's not leaving, whispered the adjutant. Why? Rakesh muttered under his breath. Why not just run? The question wasn't anyone else. It was to himself. For the first time in a lifetime of campaigns, Rakesh didn't understand the logic of the battlefield. The collapse. Inside the inferno. Jay's suit alarms had long gone silent. He could barely see, only heat haze and the dull blue glow of the shard. Something deep inside him, the part that carried wounded soldiers through trenches that had refused to abandon a dying comrade on Mars' moons, whispered the same thing it always did. Keep moving. He turned toward the exit, or what was left of it. The ceiling groaned. A steel girder broke loose and came crashing down. He rolled aside, barely clearing it. The shard slipped from his fingers, skidding across the floor. He crawled after it, coughing so hard he saw stars. By the time his hand closed around it again, his vision was swimming. Hey, Kel, he muttered hoarsely, half-conscious. You better make this worth it, kid. He stumbled toward the last section of corridor still intact, the escape shaft. He reached for the release latch. Nothing. Burned out. A hollow laugh escaped him. Figures. Then the deck beneath him cracked. A deep, grinding sound. He fell. When he came to, the world was a haze of heat and shadow. Something large loomed above him, breathing raggedly. Rakesh. The alien general had descended into the fire himself, armor half melted, eyes burning with something more than fury. Idiot human, he growled, hauling Jay upright with a strength that rattled bone. You think you have a monopoly on bravery? Jay wheezed a laugh. Didn't know you took volunteers. Together, they stumbled to the collapsing corridors, smoke curling around them like living things. A support beam gave way above. Rakesh shoved Jay clear, taking the impact across his armored shoulder. The sound was sickening. You'll die down here, Jay rasped. The general grinned, a sharp, predatory thing that somehow looked almost human. Then we die proving your madness is contagious. Through fire. When they finally burst through the last airlock, the outpost behind them erupted in a plume of molten debris. The heat wave hurled both men forward. Jay hit the ground hard, gasping, the shard still clutched in his hand. Rakesh staggered upright, smoke trailing from his armor. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then the general looked down at him. You had no command, no obligation, he said quietly. Yet you ran into the heart of the storm. Jay, barely conscious, whispered, "Yeah, it's kind of our thing." The alien crouched beside him, eyes glowing faintly. "I used to think courage was a weapon. Now I think it's a disease. And you've infected me." Jay smiled weakly. "Good. World could use more of it." When Kale found them minutes later, both were barely alive. The human burnt, the alien bleeding, the shard safe between them. He dropped to his knees beside Jay, shaking him. "You came back." Jay managed a faint grin. "Told you never let go." Behind them, Vrakesh stood, gazing at the flames consuming his outpost. His voice was quiet, almost reverent. "I laughed at your courage, human. I thought it was recklessness. But perhaps," he looked at the child, then at Jay, "perhaps it's the only logic the universe forgot." Jay looked up at him, eyes glassy. "Now you're getting it, General." Final image. When the rescue ships finally arrived, they found two figures standing amid the ash, one scaled, one scarred, both holding the same piece of burning light between them. The human's body was shaking, but he refused to let go of the shard. The alien's hand covered his, steadying it. Two species, one flame, and above them, Draxian's copper dawn bled into gold, as if the planet itself was tired of pretending that courage had a color. No one knew who moved first. One moment. The reactor bay was quiet, a deathly silence filled with smoke and flickering red light. The next, the alarm screamed again, and molten fire surged behind the broken shield barrier. The reactor core of Hydra 7, that monstrous Virellian energy, was splitting apart. The damage from the bombardment had reached its limit. If it went critical, it wouldn't just kill everyone inside. It would vaporize the entire colony and rip a crater through the planet's crust. Zyra Thal stood frozen at the edge of the control bridge, her eyes reflecting the roiling fire below. The engineers shouted, the soldiers scrambled, but none of them could reach the controls. The heat was too intense, even for Virellian physiology. And that's when Elias moved. No hesitation. No orders. He just dropped his rifle, tightened the seals on his cracked armor, and started walking toward the fire. "Human, what are you doing?" Zyra barked, her voice slicing through the chaos. Elias didn't turn. "You said courage without power is nothing." He looked back just once, his face half hidden behind a scorched visor. "Let's see what courage does when it walks through fire." The moment stretched. No one spoke. Then he stepped into the inferno. The first few meters turned his armor dull and black. The heat sensors screamed warnings, but Elias ignored them. Every second mattered. He had memorized the map of the bay, or what was left of it. He climbed over molten cables, ducked falling metal beams, his breath ragged and shallow inside the cracked helmet. Each step was agony, but he kept going. Zyra could only watch from the glass bridge above. Her claws dug into the console until sparks flew. She had fought for years, spilled blood across galaxies, but this, watching a human walk into a dying star for a child, made her feel powerless. Her son lay unconscious in the medbay behind her. If the reactor went, there would be nothing left of him or of anyone else. Inside the core chamber, Elias reached the final control node. The system was alien, elegant, fluid, made of living circuits that pulsed like veins. He didn't understand the tech fully, but he didn't need to. He understood sacrifice. He grabbed a melted power conduit with his bare hand, wrenched it free, and jammed it into the manual override port. Electricity tore through his body. His armor lit up in a storm of sparks. Zyra shouted his name, but he couldn't hear her anymore. The flames drowned everything. He locked the override with his own ID chip, a human system not meant to integrate with alien tech. The system rejected it once, twice, 3 times, until he forced it in manually. "Override accepted," said the voice in broken Virellian code. Then the light dimmed, the core stabilized, and Elias collapsed. For a long, fragile moment, no one moved. The fire retreated, shrinking from a blaze into smoldering embers. The alarms fell silent. The trembling of the ground stopped. General Zyra's soldiers stared wide-eyed at the blackened walkway. One whispered, "He did it, the human did it." Zyra didn't speak. She sprinted down the bridge stairs, boots clanging against metal. The heat hit her like a wall, but she didn't care. When she found Elias, his armor was half melted, his breathing shallow, but his face somehow was calm. "You," Zyra whispered, kneeling beside him. "You saved my son." He tried to smile. "Told you courage has power." Her silver fingers trembled as she reached out. The mighty Virellian general, once untouchable, now kneeling in the soot beside a dying human. For the first time in her long, disciplined life, Zyra Thal bowed her head. Hours later, when the fires were gone and the soldiers had secured the base, she stood at the landing platform watching the med-evac ship rise. Her son was safe. The human, barely alive, was aboard, wrapped in medical stasis gel. The Virellian troops stood in silence. None of them laughed at humanity now. One officer murmured, "General, what should we tell the council? That we were saved by a primitive—" Zyra turned slowly, her silver eyes burning like stars. "No," she said. "Tell them we were saved by a human." Weeks later, across the galaxy, the story spread like wildfire. It reached the colonies, the fleets, the alien academies. They called it the Firewalk. And somewhere in the middle of every retelling, one line remained the same. He walked into fire for a child that wasn't his. That's humanity. Zyra Thal herself would later record a message to the Terran High Command. In it, her voice, once mocking, once proud, carried something new. Respect. "Captain Elias Ward," she said, "taught me that courage is not the absence of fear. It is the will to burn, if it means another will live. The galaxy has many warriors, but there is only one kind who walks through fire uninvited, the human." And when Elias finally awoke, drifting in the medical pod, he asked just one question. "The kid, he okay?" The Virellian nurse smiled softly. "He's waiting to see you." Elias closed his eyes, relief washing through him. He didn't know he had changed the course of 2 civilizations. He just knew a child was safe. And that was enough. When Zyra's son grew older, he would wear a small piece of scorched metal around his neck, a fragment of human armor. He would tell his friends, with quiet pride, "This belonged to the man who walked through fire for me." And somewhere, across the stars, that old human phrase whispered through alien halls. A phrase that no longer sounded like myth. Humanity. Hell yeah. They called it the day the general bowed. But to Elias, it was just another day he woke up with the scent of smoke still clinging to his lungs. The med bay of the Virellian flagship Ardent Sky was quiet. Pale blue light washed over the walls. Machines hummed softly, and for once there was no screaming, no gunfire, no command shouting in his earpiece. Just peace, the kind that felt foreign after years of war. He blinked, groggy, staring at the ceiling, and there she was, General Zyra Thal, standing at the foot of his bed. Gone was the armor, the battlefield glare, the cold authority. She wore ceremonial silver robes, and across her chest gleamed a new symbol, the emblem of unity, etched with both human and Virellian insignias. "Captain Ward," she said quietly, "welcome back." Her voice no longer carried the edge of superiority. It carried reverence. Elias groaned, half smiling. "You still owe me a drink, General." Her lips curved just a little. "And you owe me half a planet. You stopped it from vaporizing." Over the next few days, the story spread through every communication channel in the galaxy. Alien broadcasts called it the human who burned for peace. Human news stations just called him the Firewalker. Children, human and alien alike, drew pictures of a man walking through fire, holding a child in his arms. And for the first time in living memory, the galaxy stopped laughing at humanity. They stopped calling humans reckless apes. They stopped sneering at Earth's outdated tech, their messy politics, their stubborn pride. Because every civilization suddenly understood humans might not have the best ships or the strongest weapons, but they had something the galaxy couldn't replicate: heart. When Elias was strong enough to stand, Zyra escorted him personally through the Virellian capital. The entire plaza was filled, thousands of alien soldiers, scientists, citizens, all watching in silence as a human captain walked beside their general. And then something no human had ever witnessed happened. The great Virellian banners, woven from living light, bent low. The soldiers raised their fists to their chests, the gesture of deepest honor. Elias stopped, stunned. What is this? Zyra turned to him. You saved not just my son, Captain. You saved what my people believed about yours. She drew her ceremonial blade, pressed a flat side against his shoulder, and said the words every Virellian child grew up hearing. By fire, by courage, by the blood shared, I name you friend of crown. The crowd erupted. For the first time in centuries, the Virellian Empire saluted a human. Later that night, after the ceremony, Zyra and Elias stood on a high balcony overlooking the twin moons. Below, the city glowed, half rebuilt, half scarred, but alive. Zyra broke the silence first. You know, when I first met you, I thought your kind were suicidal. Charging into battles you couldn't win. Dying for people who didn't even know your names. Elias smirked. And now I think maybe that's what makes you dangerous. You don't fight because you're strong. You fight because you care. He nodded. We're good at caring too much. Sometimes it gets us killed. Zyra's gaze softened. And sometimes it saves a galaxy. In the months that followed, humans and Virellians began training together. Shared academies, shared fleets, shared hope. There were disagreements, of course. There always are. But whenever things grew tense, someone would mention the Firewalker. And suddenly, both sides would quiet down. Because that story, a human walking into fire for an alien child, had become more than a tale. It was a reminder of what courage looked like. Elias returned to Earth eventually. He hated the speeches, the medals, the attention. He wasn't a hero in his mind, just a soldier who'd done what anyone should have done. He retired quietly on a small farm near the old Appalachians. No soldiers, no ships, no battles, just sunsets and silence. Sometimes he'd get visitors, young recruits, alien envoys, even Zyra's son, now grown and taller than him. They'd sit on the porch, share a drink, and talk about the war, the peace, and that one impossible moment in the flames. Elias would listen, smile faintly, and always end with the same line. Don't make courage a story. Make a habit. And far away, deep in the archives of the Galactic Council, an inscription was carved into crystal. He walked into fire for a child not his own. And from that fire, 2 worlds were born anew. Years later, long after Elias Ward's passing, a Virellian fleet discovered something unusual orbiting the edge of the Perseus Arm, a human ship uncrewed, drifting through starlight. Its hull was scorched, its systems dead, but one message blinked faintly in its log files. 3 words. Walk with courage. Zyra Thal, now an old empress, read those words and smiled. Still teaching us, she whispered, even from the stars. And so the galaxy remembered, not the wars, not the bloodshed, but the moment one human walked into fire and an empire bowed. Because sometimes all it takes to rewrite the story of civilizations is one person who refuses to let fear decide what's possible. And for the first time across 1,000 worlds, the old human phrase found its way into alien tongues, translated, repeated, carved in stone and song. Humans don't just survive, they inspire.